Okay, so I'm just kind of curious, how are all the courses going to be developed?
So we're still using volunteers for all the courses. The Czech one I'll be doing mostly myself to serve as a guide of sorts, as a template. So volunteers know when to introduce certain concepts or introduce grammar, but it's all going to be done using volunteers and a community voting system for reports. So if they feel like something's not right or someone's griefing one of the courses, we can report on that specific question or guide. And because Creatonaut keeps a history on who does what, can kick them from whatever volunteer team they're part of.
Okay, that sounds good. And how does one get like involved in creating the courses?
We've got a contributor channel in the community category. So if you add your name to that, I'll follow up with everyone once the Czech course is complete.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so perhaps too early in development process, but are you sticking to language courses only? For now, yes. But Creatonaut, so if you check Creatonaut, for example, there's right now the only development environment available is Lingonaut, but the Lingonaut app is built in a way that you don't just have to make courses on languages. And down the line, I'm hoping I can add different types of courses to Creatonaut as well. So stuff like maths or music, maybe not music, I'm not very good at it, but medicine, for example, is one I've been thinking about, but that'll be way down the line, like way, way down the line. I genuinely think Lingonaut chemistry would be a good course to do. How far am I into the Czech course? So I'd say about a dozen lessons through. The way I'm going through it is first I'm doing the guides, and then because I'm making the vocab lists along with the guides, I'm making the lessons after the fact. So I've gotten about, I'd say, 9 skills done, 10 really, but 9 of them which I'm actually happy with. The 10th I'm still iffy on. I've still got to do some work on it. But I'd say about 10 skills should be about a unit and a bit. The first unit's going to be shorter, obviously, and I'm currently working on unit 2, 10th skill. The idea isn't to have the whole course finished, so other contributors can start working on theirs, but to just have enough that I can stay ahead of them so they can keep using the previous skills that I've worked on as templates whilst I keep moving forward and keep making new template skills. Kind of like that picture with Gromit putting rails in front. And I am sleeping enough, so don't worry about that.
Yeah, okay. So I don't remember exactly where, but I think I read that this app is going to be developed mainly firstly on iPhone and mainly for phone. Was this true?
Yeah. So the plan is to first develop on iPhone because that lets me easily port it to iPad OS and a Mac OS, and then I'll do Android, and then I'm going to hand it off to someone else to do web development because I'm not very good at that.
Okay. But my question was this: is this app always going to mainly be an app? I understand there was something to PC also, but is that going to be like this secondary thing always? I'm asking as a mainly computer user and secondary Android user. So yeah, that's my question.
Okay. So hopefully we'll be able to have the web client be at parity with the phone apps. But if it comes down to me having to develop the web client, since I'm not very good at web development, it would probably be a cut down version if it comes down to me doing it, at least until I can get up to scratch on web development. But ideally, they will be at parity.
Okay, that's good. Yeah. I'm. It's not a problem. I'm sure to anyone to do this on phone. I'm just
I mean, across all the devices, we will have writing exercises, so it won't be like if you're on PC, you can write them, but if you're on phone, you can only use the buttons. That's not the case.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Question was, Creatonaut hopefully will be on Mac as well. It's especially annoying for me because I use a Mac, and every time I need to use Creatonaut, I have to go into Parallels. But it's the one that most people use. So I developed it for Windows first, and it was quicker, just to spin something up in WinForms. But hopefully, after Lingonaut is released, I'll have some time to port the Creatonaut app to Mac. But Other than that, right now it'll just be for Windows. Will the learning experience be very similar to Duolingo, or will there be more stock differences? The learning experience, so I'm gonna tread lightly just because of legal reasons, but the learning experience will have more of a focus on grammar, or an equal focus on grammar and vocabulary. It won't just be like example sentences you're given and then you have to work it out on your own. I know that some people work just through immersion. I personally prefer knowing the rules in advance, and that's what I loved so much about the tips section of the old Duolingo. There won't be as much of a conversational focus, though. There will be more of a focus on like real life language usage. So it won't be just weird sentences or just things that won't come up often in conversation, but we won't have things like the role play feature like Duolingo does. That would cost a fortune in AI API fees, and it might not be all that correct either. Unless it gets real cheap, then we'll look at it. But until then, it'll be 50-50, I'd say. So it'll be like Duolingo, but with more complete grammar tips. Again, treading lightly, I would say there would be not more concise, but more comprehensive tips and question types that will help learn the language rather than simply memorizing the language, if that makes sense. Like if you haven't seen a word before with Duolingo, I feel like you're just stuck out there. Whilst ideally, if you hadn't seen a word before, you'd be able to recall the rules you've learned and deduced what a word means, the context it's supposed to be used in, tenses, clauses, stuff like that. If I got one of 100 grand today to go towards improving Lingonaut, what would you do with it? I'm not entirely sure. That's a significant amount of money. First thing I would do is, I'm not quite sure actually, that's a good question. I'd try and find a way to supercharge the contributors. So stuff like, ideally, if the grant allowed me to pay our volunteers, the ones I'm able to pay, increase the speed at which new courses come out, and maybe invest in people who I can employ who may not be willing to volunteer for courses that aren't as well, for languages that aren't as well spoken, aren't as common, and might not have the volunteers they need to write out a course and keep them alive. How prominent will LGBT references be? So we allow a lot of autonomy for individual course writers, and we won't allow censorship. So if someone requests that, if some government entity requests that we have to remove certain references, then we won't comply. But if course leaders, for example, or other course contributors find references in the course they're working on and they don't like it and they remove it, we have the same reporting functionality within course teams so that someone can report it and say, this person's deliberately removing LGBT references, and we can follow up on them. The Lingonaut team in general doesn't have an issue with having LGBT references in Lingonaut, and I feel like if it's something that can make people feel more included, then we should have more of them. Just passing references, yeah. More direct stuff like they're trans. If it's part of vocabulary, which it is, definitely it should be included. Do you think it'd be contained in its own unit? I think it would be littered throughout the course, where it would be most contextually relevant and natural. And how will you handle availability in countries that consider things like being gay illegal? That would be something down to the app stores, I think. If they're ordered by a court judgment, for example, to remove our app from visibility in that country, there's nothing we can do about it. But if they come to us first, we wouldn't comply. So in all likelihood, we'd be forcefully removed from being visible, prevented from being visible in certain app stores in certain regions. But we won't remove references ourselves to be compliant. Are forums going to work within the app? So for forums specifically, you will be able to launch a web view that will let you use the forum within the app, but it won't be integrated. The sentence discussions will be integrated in the app, so you'll be able to use your Lingonaut username and password, which are separate from the forum username and password, to submit sentence discussions or answer questions. I've tried linking them together. I'm still working on it, but it's quite difficult. So I haven't spent too much time on trying to combine the forum and app credentials together. But ideally they would, but even then, at most, it'll allow the web view to log you in automatically and not be like a native forum page within the app. It'll be as if you're opening the forum in Safari, for example, but there'll be a button within the app for you to do that. I feel like if there was a grammar button that you can press and it'll color code the word. So I thought about that, and a few months back, I did try integrating a feature like that, but it was a lot of effort on the part of the volunteers because all the information would have to be manually put in, or a dictionary that also, would have the right syntax for the app to ingest it and just print out like the tense or class or gender or sentence structuring. So maybe down the line, right now, like the first few attempts, it didn't go well. So not at launch. We won't have it at launch. It's just the vocab lists. That'll be a lot of work. One thing I want to avoid is feature creep. No, scope creep and overpromising and under-delivering. So I want to make sure that, at least for launch, there's something that we can feasibly put together and release in a reasonable time frame. And once the app is out, then I can start promising or adding in new features like the grammar checker. Any chance of a Welsh course? Yes, a Welsh course is confirmed. I just have it, so I've added it into Creatonaut, but I haven't added it into the Discord channel list yet, but it's confirmed. Would it be possible to add endangered languages or extinct languages? Yeah, so it all depends on how many volunteers we have willing to work on a course. How would you mark them as such? We wouldn't mark them. So anyone who's searching for that course can just scroll through the list of the courses we have available and pick it. It won't be like specifically in gold lettering or like different font or whatever to suggest that it's extinct or endangered. We haven't included it yet, but we probably should for completion of dictionaries. Is there a limit to no censorship, or are content lists vocab completely within the purview of the course creators? So there is a limit to the no censorship. The dictionary lists, should we have them, and just the general vocab lists for courses shouldn't have vocabulary that can be easily used or can be considered with their primary use being hate speech. So things like the N-word wouldn't be included in courses, and if they would, they'd be removed. I'd say the no censorship rule is no censorship as far as it comes to infringing on people's rights. So stuff like LGBT interests, they're more of a human right than a political position, for example. So things like that, we're not going to budge on the no censorship rule. Would it be possible for a user to mod their own courses? For now, if they wanted to, they could mod the course file and then preview it within Creatonaut. There will be a new update coming out in the next few days of a working preview window, if you'd want to see what that looks like. Are there going to be other ways for us who would like to contribute to track what stage the course currently is at? Yes. So I'm actually going to open, maybe not an open forum, but I'm going to be asking in general one day about what's the best way to go about doing that, because the Discord channels, I feel like, aren't a good way to coordinate course development. The new Launchpad we have is an improvement, but it's still mostly a portal to the forums and the channels and a way to upload course files. And I feel like, once you have multiple teams going and each team has multiple people, we need a better way to organize things. Is the hate speech rule because the app is based in the EU or EU adjacent countries? No, it's just a matter of what's morally correct and what's the decent thing to do. What about borderline words? So we're going to play it safe. Words that can be considered slurs in some places and aren't in others, they still won't be allowed. Like I know that for example, in some European places, the G word is commonly accepted, but we won't be accepting it. Is there a list somewhere? There will be a list on the new Launchpad for each course. That's one of the reasons why each course has its own page now. I have an Excel spreadsheet of who's working on which one, but I still have to put it online. Did this get answered? Yeah, it's because it's just morally correct to stop people from providing like an open opportunity for people to commit hate speech. The idea is that open discussion is okay, but your freedoms end once they start infringing on the freedoms of others. So even if a word might be technically fine in one part of the world, but a slur in another part, we're still going to be blanket banning it just because everyone's from everywhere. It's less about potential people taking offense and more about it just being the right thing to do. Will apps be open source or proprietary? So right now, open source isn't in the works. It's something that I've said I'm going to think about down the line, but right now I don't think it fits what we're trying to do. It's easy to make an app open source, but it's difficult to make a platform open source. Will there be an XP/League system? How will that work if they can edit their courses? Yeah, so there will be an XP and League system, but they'll all use the quote-unquote official courses that the app will automatically download. The courses that they can edit, like I said, you can edit them and then open them in Creatonaut and then sort of audit them, but you can't load them into the app and then run them as a traditional course. And I think we might even have problems doing that if you try and submit the app to the App Store. They're not very loose but they're not very accommodating when it comes to user-created content. So it'll just be the official courses on the app, but you can modify your own courses and open them in Creatonaut or in Notepad and then audit them in Creatonaut. What countries' laws will this app be subject to? So it's built around UK law, and UK law for now is roughly identical to EU law. So I personally live in the UK and the Czech Republic, so that's what we're going around because I'm more familiar with their laws. And I feel like they're more comprehensive than the US laws. Just wanting to clarify, you are saying that it's morally the right thing to censor words that we find objectionable, but wrong to censor themes that we find okay, but render the whole app illegal. Yes, because the words that we find objectionable are objectively objectionable, whilst the themes that we find all right but render the whole app illegal are themes that no reasonable person would find illegal. Do you have any pics or videos to share so we can see what stuff currently looks like? Right now, the stuff I've got available is already pinned in general. I don't have any new pics right now from the last month or two. But once the stage is over, I'll post a bunch from the last few weeks so you can take a look at as well. Doesn't China ban apps that refuse to transfer data to their country? If they do, then that's something that Apple and Google would be in charge of. They wouldn't have access to our Firebase, so the best they could do is ask us to transfer our data to China, which we won't do. Will there be typing lessons for countries' keyboard layouts? Not specifically, no. That'll be something you'll have to get better at just by typing in that language. I mean, maybe down the line, but not at launch. Making different keyboard layouts would be very difficult. Will there be in-game cosmetics to buy for real money? Not at launch. That's only a last resort sort of plan if we can't fund the platform. So hopefully the only in-game cosmetics we can get are ones that aren't, or Patreon specific pins and stuff like that, just so people know you're a patron. But nothing that affects the features available to you. And hopefully no in-game cosmetics that can buy for real money. I thought of having an in-game currency that you still can't buy with real money, but for now, I feel like that detract a bit from the purpose of the app. And plus, even as an analog to gems in Duolingo, you can't really use those for anything anyway. Will the courses have a political leaning in their learning, or will they be non-biased one way or another? So they'll teach the language just as the language is. Any like recent developments in politics, or barring any words that may be slurs or may now be considered slurs, the language won't be affected. It'll be just as the language is. So stuff like forcing Spanish into a non-gendered language is not something we do because Spanish is a gendered language, and that isn't a commentary on any political issue. That's just how the language is. what question types are already implemented or are planned to be in the future? So we've got 6 question types right now. It's difficult to explain them because what Duolingo holds those sorts of question types and what we call them are different. But what we call them is image pick, where you're given like a piece of vocabulary and you're given 4 images and you're asked to pick which one it is. You've got the pick one question type, where you're given vocabulary or question, and then you're given 3 options to pick from, and one of them's the right answer. You've got the match type questions, so you're given 2 sets of vocabulary, perhaps one in English, one in a target language, and you're asked to match them together. You've got one where you pick words, so it's like the written exercises, but you're given the words as buttons. And then you've got the written words one where you need to use your keyboard. And you've got the audio ones where you're given a piece of audio and you're asked to match that to the written version. That's the only ones that are implemented so far, but there's a few more that I do want to implement before launch. One example is the one where you're just given some audio and you're asked to finish. So you're given the audio of a sentence, but the sentence is only partially completed, and you need to complete the sentence from what you heard. Will there be a way to fund through the app because I don't use Patreon? Yes. So like down the line where I've got some free time, there'll be a way to pay through the app or pay through the website if you don't want to use Patreon, and it'd be preferred even because Patreon takes a lot of money. Like it takes, like I know they say 8%, but between the transfer fee and the fee PayPal takes and the exchange rate fees and their own and Patreon's own fees, they take about 20-something%. So will you be able to disable specific exercises like listening, speaking, typing? You'll be able to disable listening exercises so we can better cater to people who might not be able to hear so well, or you may be in a place where you want to practice, but you need to be quiet. I remember doing Duolingo at a wedding, so how will accessibility options be like? Will there be a font to cater to dyslexic people? Will there be themes to cater to people's different vision capabilities? So that's something that ideally I would have, but I will need some people from the community that have like specific disabilities or accessibility needs or concerns that would be able to help me implement them correctly. I know there's guidelines online, but I think it'd be better to hear from people who actually have problems using certain apps that I could, use to help implement them in the Lingonaut app. I'm a native Russian speaker. Is there anything I can do to help? We're not planning a Russian course right now, but if you put your name in the contributors channel or put your application in the contributors channel, I can message you when we do have a Russian course open. Based on CEFR levels, what level would Lingonaut take the learner to? So because you can't get a license for CEFR, I figured we just, at least in the near term, just make our own ranking system. And the lowest ranking, which I think that Lingonaut would take the learner to, is 60% coverage of a language. So vocabulary, grammar. Sorry, not grammar, just vocabulary. So give the learner, by the end of the course, complete understanding of the grammar and 60% coverage of conversational vocabulary at minimum. And then there'd be like, as the courses grow, there'd be 70 plus, 80 plus, 90 plus, with 90 plus obviously being knowing specialist vocabulary, specialist language that, for example, a chemical engineer would be able to use at work. I haven't equated them to CEFR yet, but I will let you know. I'll post about it. And if I forget, just message and I'll like post a graphic. Will there be courses for dialects of languages? Yes. So I've already baked in that support in the app. How will dialects that heavily differ from their source language be handled? So each dialect to be considered a different language in the app. They may have the same forum, and then each dialect would have a different sub-forum on the website, but they'll be considered, as far as the UI is concerned, as separate languages that you can get from the list. You said you take a politically neutral stance. I'd like you to know that. Would you use words like right-wing and left-wing? Yes, because, for this specific case, the words right-wing and left-wing aren't inherently political. And if they're used in everyday language, which I think nowadays they are, then they'd be added. But they'd be dictionary definitions, there won't be any kind of bias written into their meanings. They'll be added, but as far as how they're explained, it'll be the dictionary definition. Do the volunteers pronounce audio for the words? Yeah, so ideally it'll be volunteers speaking, but we do have a TTS backup that people can use within Creatonaut if they're not able to speak, for example, and then hopefully another volunteer can take over and fill those gaps. So the volunteers first, and the app will automatically use TTS as a fallback if a volunteer's audio isn't found for that word or that sentence. Are contributors required to have any kind of equipment? They're not required to have any kind of equipment and except for a Windows PC right now. But if they want to use their own voice, which ideally they'd have to use a nice microphone, or at least a legible microphone that has the background noise cleaned out. All right, I think that's time. It was great answering all the questions and hearing from everyone. This was great. I think it was useful and productive. I've gotten quite a few ideas as well. I hope to see you all here first Monday of next month. So goodbye.